Welcome back to the Breaking Free from Porn podcast. My name is Samir, and today we will talk about a concept called the confirmation bias. We'll talk about the narrative that you feed yourself and how it is limiting you, how it is making it harder for you to quit porn for good. So, I want to start off with a conversation I had, I believe, a week or two ago. Now, this conversation might be a bit controversial, and I'm not here to debate if I'm not here to say that one side is true and one side is false, or that I'm right and he's wrong, or he's right and I am wrong. I just want to show you an example of something that will allow you to realize that you're making the same mistake potentially, or actually you're making the same mistake when it comes to quitting porn. So, this discussion I had the other day was that I had someone tell me that there were no good women anymore. And that they basically, just to paraphrase what he said, that they file for divorce and they take your money, and it's basically very risky to get married nowadays. It is super risky because you can lose this and that and this. And I do not necessarily disagree, okay? But let me explain something very important. What he mentioned to me before and also after saying this was that he would often watch videos of such things happening. Now, for me, I don't have that fear around marriage, whatever. So I'm in the process of potentially getting married. And I don't really have that fear. I don't have that fear not because I don't think that it exists. I know that it exists for sure. That, of course, the marriage can go wrong and the woman can take whatever, whether it be assets, whether it be just she divorces you for no reason, whatever. I know that these things can happen, but imagine just watching videos of such things happening constantly, like constantly being on Instagram, constantly seeing these cases. And for me, I never barely watch these videos. I only hear like of a few stories. I'm not denying that they happen or that they happen a lot, but I'm saying I never really feed myself such content. I don't see the point in doing so. And that made me think, okay, this guy, when I look at him from the outside, because I really know him, well, he's basically just feeding himself one side of the coin, one side of the coin. Whilst for me, I will tell you right now, I'm not saying that I'm better or by any means. I'm just thank God for, I guess, having a different perspective on this because I grew up, of course, I grew up in Canada where some of these things do occur, but I've been around like so many different cultures that I see, okay, in this country, this happens like this, in this other country, okay, in South America, it's like this, in Asia, it's like this, in Africa, it's like this, in Europe, it's like this, that I see that it doesn't have to be the way that he's describing it, where women just file for divorce and the marriage always ends up in divorce for whatever reason, and that they lose their money and they lose their time and they get cheated on and so on. So for me, I had a different perspective on it. It's like I've seen the other side of the coin. I've seen different sides of the coin, basically. Why am I talking about this though? Why am I talking about such an example? Is that we do the same mistake when it comes to NoFap. We only see one side of the coin and we hyper focus on that. You get into the YouTube videos talking about NoFap. You go on the Reddit forums, the groups, you go in the communities, the groups, and it seems like everyone is just struggling. Everyone is just can't quit this habit, and it's been years. And you see people saying, I relapsed after 6 months. I relapsed after 2 years. I relapsed after 30 days. I relapsed after 2 weeks. And sometimes, sadly, and this is pretty rare, but it does happen. You see people saying, I want to literally end my life. And that's very, very, and very dangerous. Not just because you can, obviously, I wish this never happens that someone takes his life because he could not quit porn. But it did happen multiple times where there were certain posts like these posted. We don't know what the person did afterwards, but it's really sad to see. But it kills you in a sense of it's like you only see that side of the coin. It's like imagine all of your life, you've been told that, I'll give you a good analogy for this actually. Imagine that you go in a swimming pool and you don't know, but everyone that's there, like swimming in the pool, they're all beginners. They've never swam before, it's their first time. So they go swimming and you see that they're struggling. And that's, you only see these swimmers. You don't see anyone else swimming that day. And you see that they're all swimming. And it's, let's say it's your first time swimming too. You're going to think, so swimming must be hard. If they're all struggling, they're out of breath and they need help, and you can see in their faces that they feel fear. You will expect that. You will expect yourself to react and to act the same way in that swimming pool, because that's the only side of the coin that you exposed yourself to. But if you expose yourself to other people swimming with good form and they had experience, you would go in there thinking, okay, look, yeah, I might have a bit of fear, but okay, I see that these guys are doing it, let me try. But in the first example where you said, oh no, these people are struggling, what do you do then? You expect yourself to struggle, so you don't even really try. Or if you try, you barely really go all in, because you think, well, I might struggle and I might face consequences like just drowning. So the problem is not the water. It's the belief that this is the reality, that swimming must feel like drowning, that swimming is hard, and so on. Your perception is extremely important. And if you feed yourself only one side of the coin again, that is negative, limiting, you will think that this is all there is to life, that there are no other possibility. And that made so much sense to me, because I remember when I was going on the internet in my room alone. I was super lonely at that time. I was just doing the same routine every day. Nothing was happening. I was, you can say, depressed. And I just remember being in my room, like thinking, well, everyone struggles with this, because I would just go on these Reddit groups and would watch these videos, and you only see people struggling. I think, okay, well, it must be hard, like everyone is struggling. And then months after that, then I left it, because I really did a lot of research and so on, and I realized, okay, like quitting must be done like this, and it's not like that complicated. When I left it, I started socializing with people that were basically doing self-improvement. Self-improvement is just like they were trying to better their lives, like doing good habits, and they had goals, they had like a new mission, a purpose. Maybe they got closer to God, maybe they started a business, maybe they just had some projects and they were just trying to improve themselves for a bigger mission, picture, purpose, whatever. And I remember talking to them, and a lot of these guys, yeah, sure, some of them were still struggling with adult content, but a lot of them, surprisingly, they never watch any of these videos, these porn recovery videos, these NoFap videos. They never really had much knowledge about how to quit and the different techniques. They just said, I want to quit. I wanted to quit this because I wanted to go all in on my business. I got closer to God, so I decided to just leave it behind. They just found a good reason why to leave it behind, and they didn't brainwash themselves with this NoFap ideology that, no, if you want to quit, it's going to be impossible because you're addicted, and look, all of these other people are struggling, and you're basically in the same situation as them, so therefore you're going to be struggling again. They didn't expose themselves to that reality that is not the only reality. They didn't expose themselves to that ideology, and because of that, they moved on naturally. They didn't think, oh no, I can't move on because I see everyone, they keep on struggling. They didn't have that fear around relapsing, for example. They didn't have the thought of, I need to fight this. Because they didn't have that thought, they just let it go. They didn't fight those urges and those thoughts. They just thought, oh, okay, this is just a desire to do it again, but I'm just focused on whatever I want to do. I don't think it's worth it for me to do it. Maybe they had a bit of struggle, like everyone. Like you leave something behind that you've been doing for all of these years. Of course, it might feel uncomfortable at first. You don't have your coping mechanism anymore. You don't have something that used to give you pleasure. But then you adapt to it. And you see, it is not supposed to be hard like you constantly see on the internet. That's why it's so powerful. For example, in life in general, a lot of people talk about traveling. I love traveling, by the way. I'm in Asia currently as I'm recording this podcast. Going back to the example I gave, for example, I remember just going to Asia for the first time and talking about women and things of that nature. I saw that their perspective on the relationship between the man and woman was a complete 180 from the one that we find in the West. And then I realized, okay, well, that's not the only side of the coin. What people see in America, in Canada, in the United Kingdom, in Australia, well, that doesn't need to be the only reality, because there are other realities, and there are also other realities in those countries themselves. Because I've seen, for example, I'll just give you a very simple example. I've seen men, for example, where they were very confident and they really worked on themselves. So these exact problems of like the fear around divorce and cheating and so on, for them, they just took the action to prevent these things. They did certain things. I'm not going to talk about these things because that's a different topic, but they just went about it with full confidence. They didn't think, okay, this is just going to be my fate. I'm just going to get married and then my wife is going to cheat on me. No, they knew what they had to do. So these things didn't happen. They knew there were another side of the coin. So just to go back on NoFap, when you go watch these NoFap videos, you go on these forums, these groups, you only expose yourself to negative things. You might think it's productive because you're learning new things. But the reality is, it will be far more productive for you to stop completely, to remove all of the content, all of the information that promotes these ideas of struggling, of making it a lifelong struggle, of just constantly having to fight off desires, urges, and so on. And that's why, for example, when we go through the coaching, a lot of the students, they just have like these big realizations. We go through the root cause and issue, that's the first thing. But then with the videos and the coaching, they realize, oh, I've been shown just one side of the coin. Now that I see this other side of the coin, I don't have to just struggle like everyone else, because they struggle because they only see that one side of the coin. Now that I see the other side of the coin, it makes sense. But you need to remove that narrative. Confirmation bias, as is the title of this podcast, is when you only look at something, you feed yourself a narrative, and then you act according to that, and then you confirm that this is true because you act according to that. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a pure placebo effect. You expect something, so you act in accordance to that expectation, and then it happens, and then you're like, oh, look, this is true. What I expected is true. Do you see why this can literally destroy your mind? So that's why you need to remove that narrative, that confirmation bias. And I'm telling you right now, quitting porn can truly be just a choice. It can be effortless. And I'll see you guys in the next episode.